If you aren't getting views on your video, it's very highly unlikely that it's because you're not providing enough value in the video. And it's very likely that your thumbnail game needs some work. The reason why I say this is because after analyzing over 100 thumbnails, I noticed that the videos that tend to perform better in terms of getting more views are the ones with dedicated thumbnails. And that's why in this very video over here today, you're going to be discovering the top 3 thumbnail formats that have been used by all of the top entrepreneurs in the online business space. I'm breaking down exactly what these formats are, why they work so well, and how you can leverage them to increase your click-through rates. And trust me, this isn't some recycled YouTube guru advice that you've already heard a million times over. It's literally the difference between the videos that get 5,000 views and the videos that get 10,000 views. It's literally the same reason why 20% of the videos are watched by 80% of the niche or the target markets, while the other 80% of videos don't even get watched by 20% of the markets. So without any further ado, let's learn something new. All right, so before we discuss the 3 common thumbnail formats for all business channels and the ones that you can implement today to get more views on your videos, we have to go through and understand what a thumbnail is and what its purpose is. Basically, the purpose of a thumbnail is to get someone to click a video. You're converting cold traffic into warmer traffic for business terms, for all my business nerds out there. With that being said, let's continue. All right, so now that we know that a thumbnail's purpose is to get clicks and to get people to say, this is a video that I can't afford to not watch, we have to go through thumbnail formats so that you can truly understand the concept and the thought process behind these thumbnails that have performed well and in the formats that I'm going to show you later on in this video. A thumbnail format is basically how the elements of the thumbnail are populated to entice people to click. It's how all of these things like the text, like the person's face, the circles, the arrows, all those different effects are put together in such a way to make people think this is a video that I can't afford to not watch. An example of this would be text over here. So over here, I literally wrote text and I said, I'm a text, I'm an element. That's an example of an element. And how you place that element is essentially how it's populated on the screen. Now, there is only a few places that you can place an element within a confined area. There's the upper thirds, the lower thirds, and the middle thirds. There's many different ways to populate your text and where you can place it, whether it's upper, middle, or lower thirds. And you're going to be finding out exactly which one works best for you when I show you the 3 best business thumbnails that I've outlined later on in this video. Okay, so just to hit this point home, the purpose of a thumbnail is to get people to say, I can't afford to not watch this video. And the thumbnail format is how those elements in the thumbnail have been populated to get that reaction out of people. And I know you're probably asking yourself, yeah, why do I need to know anything about thumbnail formats? What are thumbnail formats going to help me with? And that's what I'm going to explain in this section over here. The way that the elements are populated can greatly influence how enticing a video or a thumbnail is to the viewer. And if you run a business, it's extremely important that you get people to click so that you can get leads and then you can drive sales and then you can have business revenue. And that all starts with having a great thumbnail. And having a great thumbnail comes down to understanding which formats are working. Things like placement of text, images, or other visual elements can make a thumbnail more eye-catching and more compelling. So understanding common thumbnail formats and best practices is crucial for creating thumbnails that effectively grab the viewer's interest. By optimizing the elements and layouts of your thumbnails, you can increase the chances of your videos being discovered and watched. Alright, so now that I've given you the game on what to look for when it comes to creating thumbnails, especially in terms of the formats, I'm going to be showing you how to analyze thumbnails that have performed well. And this is going to be extremely important because once I show you the top performing B thumbnails, you're going to understand that this is all just going to make sense. So before we identify the common formats, we must identify the common elements. So the very first common element in every business-oriented thumbnail, any video that's about business, is number 1, text. Each and every single one of these videos are business-related videos. They directly speak to people who are running a business or who want to run a business or have a problem with their business. And as you can see over here, we have text. This is David Fogarty. He does dropshipping. We have text in this video. This is Daniel Fazio. He does agency stuff. There's text over here. There's text over here. There's text over here. This lady, Laura Burton, does business stuff. This is across any business thumbnail. You need to have text because it makes the video so much clearer and so much more understandable. Next, the second most commonly used element across the thumbnails of all business-oriented videos is icons.
So over here, as you can see with the lady Laura, she has these email icons and this graph icon over here going up, which indicates increase in revenue. David Fogarty has the Shopify logo over here. And then with Daniel Fazio over here, he has these lines over here to indicate an increase in business revenue. And then finally, the third most common element with business content is a human's face. So over here with this lady Laura, she has a face over here. David Fogarty, he has his face over here. Daniel Fazio has his face over here. Big disclaimer. To be clear, not every thumbnail targeting a business-minded audience is going to have all of these elements, but most of them do. And the reason why is because obviously it works. But some thumbnails aren't going to have all of these elements. Some thumbnails may just have like a human's face and an icon. Some thumbnails may just have a human's face and some text. So you want to keep that in mind moving forward. You don't have to use all of these, but you have to use 2 out of 3 of these because that's essentially what works. You can't have a thumbnail without a human's face and without text. You're not going to get clicks like that. So now that we know and we've identified the common elements, let's see how these elements have been populated across these thumbnails. So with Daniel Fazio, let's have a look at where the text is populated. We can see the text is populated in the upper thirds and the middle thirds over here. This one is also in the middle and lower thirds over here. There's some text here and the upper thirds. Most of the text, as you can see, is in the upper thirds. Where the icons are populated, I count this line as an icon. This is basically in all thirds, upper, lower, and middle thirds. Where the humans are populated, he's mainly populated in the upper thirds. His face is here, so that's where he's populated. With David Fogarty, his text is populated in the middle and upper thirds. His icons are populated in the upper, middle, and lower thirds. I count this graph as an icon, and his face is in the upper and middle thirds. With Laura, her face is in the upper thirds and right. I think a bit of it is in the middle thirds. Her text is in the middle and lower thirds. Her icons are in mainly the middle thirds. Just basically this parted arrow and that over there, that's in the upper thirds. So the common population for these thumbnails is the upper and middle thirds for human faces, the middle thirds for icon graphics and pictures, the upper thirds and middle thirds for text. So when making your thumbnails, I'd recommend sticking to this over here. Use these as your training wheels and then iterate once you see something that's working. But right now, this is what is working. All right, so now the moment that you guys have all been waiting for. These are the 3 most common thumbnail formats of all the business-oriented videos on YouTube. At least the ones that I selected. A huge disclaimer is that I selected these thumbnails by the business people who were generating the most business from YouTube organically with the most amount of views on a video towards a business-oriented audience. So that's how these thumbnails were selected. I didn't just go with any basic Joe Schmo thumbnails. These are basically the creme de la creme, how I'm saying that right, of thumbnails that are specifically designed to drive results and drive leads, which is what any business person wants. And the 3 popular formats are the mugshot magnets. The characteristics of a mugshot magnet is a close-up of a person's face, usually with an expressive emotion like shock, excitement, or curiosity. And another characteristic of the mugshot magnet, which accompanies the face, is bold, large, thought-provoking text that summarizes the video's key message. And the reason why the mugshot magnet style just seems to pop off and work is because faces just naturally grab attention, and then the text next to it just explains what's being spoken about in the video. And then obviously the population of the elements inside the mugshot magnet style thumbnail design. The text is in all thirds, upper, lower, and middle thirds, but it's usually towards the left from what I've seen in all thumbnails that I've analyzed that are using this current format. And the humans are in the upper and middle thirds, but on the right. So I've got a few examples over here. This was popularized by Alex Ramosi. You can see his face is over here on the right, and then here's the text in the middle and lower thirds. If this counts as text over here, then it's also in the upper thirds. And then here's another one. The text over here is mainly in the upper thirds. His face is to the right as usual, and then his hand is just pointing to this over here. Obviously, this is Alex Ramosi, so you can't just say this is just based on the thumbnail. People know his face, so they're going to click on it. Another example is Iman Ghazi. This is a different variation of the mugshot magnets. This is an anomaly towards the mugshot magnets traditional style. Here is more of like the mugshot magnet traditional style. Text in the middle, thought-provoking. There's his face. There's a face on the right and on the left. Obviously, it's a podcast interview, so it would be wise to include both of them into it because it's a podcast. But if it was only Iman talking, giving advice like how Alex was, then obviously Iman would just be on the right. I just wanted to show you guys these anomalies so that you can recognize them and then implement as you move forward. And then obviously my favorite thumbnail style, losses to bosses, as you can see by the name. The characteristic of the losses to bosses thumbnail style is basically side-by-side images showing a transformation, taking someone from their loss into becoming their boss, basically taking someone from like when they weren't making as much money to making more money than they did before, or when their business wasn't growing as much to their business absolutely imploding, or just strategy changes, things like that. And another characteristic of this thumbnail that I noticed is that to really emphasize the change and to really emphasize the journey from taking a loss to becoming a fully fledged boss is that they often include arrows just to emphasize the journey that they were taking. The reason why this works is that people are drawn to change and progress, especially if you're speaking to a business audience. Like business oriented people are the people who like want to change the most and want to change the fastest. I'm not talking about like your little boy entrepreneur. I'm talking about the big boy entrepreneurs, people that take relentless action. And obviously because people have problems and they want them solved. So it's literally making an offer in one video. This isn't supposed to say mugshot magnet. It's supposed to say losses to bosses. The population of the losses to bosses thumbnail style is that the humans are in the upper and middle thirds, the text is in the upper thirds, and the icons are in the upper and middle thirds. That's like the common population that I've seen across all the thumbnails that use the style that I've analyzed. So over here with Alex and Rosie, as you can see, text is up here in the upper thirds, faces in the upper and middle thirds, and then there's this arrow over here that I've been speaking about to really emphasize the journey from taking some losses. I'm not saying he took a loss when he was younger. That's just the name of the thumbnail. From taking his losses to becoming one of the biggest bosses that everyone knows. This is another one where he emphasizes stocks as the losses and the secret thing over here as what's going to turn people into better bosses. And then this over here is another one, the color psychology over here in red, subtly, like it's so subtle. It subtly indicates that college is a loss and doing business and not going to college in this purple over here is what's going to turn people into a boss. You can have a look at all of these in your own time. You can find this document in the link in the description. Next, the third most common thumbnail formats across business oriented videos is what I like to call steps to success. The characteristics of steps to success is number one, a blueprint or whiteboard showcasing a number of steps that need to be implemented in order to achieve a certain outcome. And that's also accompanied by a person or an arrow pointing towards the blueprint or the whiteboard, which is also accompanied by the text on the blueprint or whiteboard showcasing the roadmap for the people to follow. And then the population of the steps to success is basically humans are on the upper and middle thirds, on the left or right. The blueprint or the whiteboard is in all thirds because it has to take most of the space on the thumbnail so that people can see, hey, this is a roadmap taking you from where you are now to where you want to be the next 90, 60, or however days you promise to take them to. And the text is populated across the blueprint or whiteboard. There's not necessarily a place for it to be, but what I've seen with the ones that use the board variation of the steps to success, they usually have the text in the middle or on the upper parts of the board. And then for the blueprint, they usually have text at the top of the blueprint explaining what transformation people are going to achieve by applying the steps inside of the blueprint style of the steps to success thumbnail style. Like you see over here with Alex and Rosie, it says full guide up here, and then there's these steps over here. For the board, the text either provokes the click or it simply tells you what the lesson is about. For provoking the click, I'm going to show you a quick example over here. This over here is provoking the click using the steps to success thumbnail format. It's I'm broke, what business do I start? And it says watch this. That's provoking the click. It's not necessarily telling people what the video is about. The title does most of the work. Thumbnail over here is just supporting the title by provoking the click. And then the other variation of the board, which basically just tells you what the lesson's about. Here's an example of that over here. Imangadze writes 5 principles, and then the first principle is invest in yourself first. And then the title is 5 money principles that will make anyone rich in their 20s. It's basically telling them what the video is going to be about.
At the end of the video, now that you know how to create thumbnails, please, it's extremely crucial that you implement those 3 elements into each and every single thumbnail that you create. Because if most of the business-oriented videos have those 3 elements, then they must work in terms of getting more people to click on the video and watch the video. And if you want 10 to 20 ready-to-buy clients completely done for you through content, check the first link in the description below. We literally do everything for you. So all you have to do is just kick your feet up and take sales calls.